Thank you, Madam Chair. Duly noted and duly appreciated. So without further ado, we will dive right into the candidates. We'll start off with the 4th Municipal District, which encompasses the 41st, the 43rd, the 55th, 56th, 58th, 59th, and 60th Assembly Districts. The candidate for this municipal district is Xavier Carr, and he will be brought up so that way he could give a 2-minute introduction of himself, and then we'll dive right into the questions.
Good evening, everyone. First and foremost, thank you to the Kings County Democratic Party for putting together this critical forum and giving me the opportunity to present today. As is mentioned, my name is Xavier Carr, and I'm a candidate for the 4th Municipal District. I currently serve as a senior counsel with the New York City Office of Technology and Innovation, where we are responsible for overseeing the technology infrastructure citywide. And in my role, I'm responsible for providing legal advisement to our general counsel, as well as making appearances at the Office of Trials and Hearings, as well as for judicial proceedings, and responsible for providing interagency agreements with city agencies with a focus on digital equity programs. What brought me to this agency was after serving in my prior role as a court attorney, particularly during the pandemic, I saw the impact of those litigants who did not have the same access to technology and saw that the mission was to bridge the digital divide. As I mentioned, I previously served in the Kings County Court civil term as a court attorney for 2 judges. I worked all the way up as from an unpaid intern and worked each court attorney level up to principal law clerk. And at some points during the process as well, worked dual county in both Kings County Supreme Civil Term and New York County Supreme Civil Term. And ultimately, when I left the court system, I was in New York County Civil Supreme Term handling medical malpractice matters. My experience in the court system has been drafting legal decisions as well as assisting with research, assisting the court managing its motion calendar, as well as assisting with oral arguments and court operations. As a court attorney, I had the invaluable opportunity to serve on the summer youth employment programs, youth mentorship initiatives, including assisting with the mock trial program, and as well as being a speaker. I am a proud resident of Brownsville, Brooklyn, where I spent my earliest years before leaving to New Jersey. I'm a husband, a father of three children, 18, 14, and 8, and I look forward to serving. My goal as a judge is to promote and is to advance equity, fairness, and equal justice under the law, as there's a need to expand diversity, including the need for more black men on the bench. And I hope to be able to represent my community and all those while I'm on the bench and serving as a judge and making sure that everyone is heard and has their day in court. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Xavier, for your introduction. So we're going to go right into the questions here. Again, 2 minutes to answer the questions. Anything past that, I will interject. First question that came from the general public and mostly our county committee members and district delegates was, what is your definition of justice?
My definition of justice is a system that allows individuals to seek recourse, where in this system it does not identify any individual or treat any individual differently, not based on their race, not based on their gender, sexual orientation, national origin, and rather is a place where they can have their case heard and make sure that they are treated equally and get to a resolution that can serve the interests of the community and serve the interests under the law.
Thank you. Now, what mitigating factors would you prioritize when it comes to sentencing?
The mitigating factors I would prioritize is one, seeing the individual's background in terms of uh, their involvement in the community, their education, as well as to see if they have had any prior offenses, as well as understanding that um, depending on the severity of the charge, to see if there's any way that there can be some form of a resolution that's alternative to just imprisonment, and if there is a way possible under the law that they are able to be seek rehabilitation and avoid having to just put seek the maximum sentencing limits under the law.
Thank you. Should a judge consider the risk to mental and physical health presented by incarceration when determining whether that is an appropriate measure to impose either pretrial or as a punishment for a conviction?
Yes, I believe a judge should consider those factors in light of the fact that um, individuals often at time who may be faced in these circumstances may not come from communities that are equally funded or that are underserved and may have made choices that may not have been in their best interest. However, accountability is necessary, but it's a delicate balance in the sense of having to consider one's mental health and as well as um, their background, as they may have encountered numerous instances where they did not have certain guidance as others may have had.
Thank you. Now, please describe an area where judges need more training or where training should be mandatory for judges.
I believe we should continue the training in diversity and making sure that um, that cultural differences, whether it's religious faith, whether it's sexual orientation, race, gender, that we continue to build and advance the equity within these areas, and that judges that we can continue to get closer to promoting fairness and equitable treatment under the law.
Thank you. And this will be your last question here. Should you preside in criminal court? How will your daily rulings demonstrate an understanding regarding the intersection between the criminal legal system and public health?
Um, my daily rulings will reflect that, as it's important, as I mentioned, to be mindful that in certain areas, mental health services are not as robust as others, and that certain areas require there's more of a need, and rather, of course, again, in accordance to the rule of law and those facts, I would continually seek where it is possible for any alternative form of uh, treatment or alternative form of remedy that does not necessarily seek to imprison or incarcerate or limit someone's opportunity for a second chance. I believe that there are people that may be and may benefit from a second chance, and it's important to have that in consideration where the law allows that.
Thank you, Xavier. Thank you for your time and thank you for your interest, you know, basically pursuing, this judicial candidacy, because this is something that I feel that, our communities need to have a more of an understanding of. And the more that we do forums like this, as the party has been doing, I feel that there will be a greater understanding and greater participation. So again, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Now we'll move on to the sixth municipal district. And in the sixth municipal district, that encompasses the 41st, 42nd, 43rd, 44th, 48th, 52nd, 57th, and 58th assembly districts. The first candidate we'll bring up for that district will be Brian Chelcun. And again, you have 2 minutes for an introduction, and then we'll go into questions.
Hi, thank you, District Leader Beckford and District Leader Boomer. My name is Brian Chelcun. I live in the 6th Municipal Court District in the 57th Assembly District in Crown Heights. I grew up in a small town in the Midwest. After college, I went to the Peace Corps for a couple of years and did HIV/AIDS prevention work in rural Tanzania. And then I came to New York for law school. I've been in New York for 16 years. Went to law school at NYU, where I focused on public interest law. I did internships with the ACLU, Lambda Legal, and the Appellate Defenders, and I was co-chair of the LGBT law student group at NYU. After law school, I clerked for 2 federal judges, one in Manhattan, one in Brooklyn. Before starting my career at the Legal Aid Society, which is where I've worked as a public defender my entire legal career for the last 11 years. My first 3 years there, I was traveling to Rikers Island every day to represent community members who'd been charged with violating parole, mostly minor things like curfew violations or marijuana. This was at a time when a violation would get anyone locked up indefinitely. And in fact, the New York court system actually requires judges, going back to a question I think that Xavier was asked, New York court system requires judges who sentence or set bail to make jail visits every year so that they really see the consequences of those decisions. I was doing that every day for my first 3 years. And then I spent the next 7 years representing people who got arrested in Brooklyn, ensuring that their constitutional rights were preserved, that the government was following the law, that police misconduct was not sanctioned by judges. And I appeared in front of dozens of judges at arraignment, argument, hearings, trials. In the last year, I've focused on employment issues. So I work with clients whose jobs are threatened as a result of their arrest. These are community members such as home health aides, teachers, security guards, taxi drivers, city employees. And this has been a really interesting mix of criminal law and civil law, and a reminder of how the criminal legal system can impact people's lives, even when the police contact is actually fairly isolated. Being a public defender is hard work. It's not glamorous, it's intense, it's underpaid. My union colleagues at one of the providers in Brooklyn just went on strike today, but it's so important. And it's important that this work be reflected in other areas and roles in the criminal legal system, including more elected judges who are public defenders and nonprofit public interest attorneys. So that's why last November I submitted an application with references to the Kings County Democrats in order to be screened for a potential judicial candidacy. I sat through screening interviews in January. I was found qualified by the panel, and I participated in a forum in late January.
Thank you, Brian. So your first question will be, violent crime is perceived to be at a crisis level by some experts today. What do you believe is the appropriate role for the judiciary in addressing this perceived crisis?
I think the key word is perceived, because I think actually most of the data indicates that it's not, that we're at an all-time low for violent crime, although it doesn't always feel like that for community members, which I think is why it's important that community members understand, have a better understanding of what's going on in court, have a better understanding of what judges are doing. All too often, the only things that community members are seeing are essentially New York Post hit jobs on judges who make completely reasonable bail decisions, only to have their names smeared and have threats against them. So I appear in criminal court every day. I represent people accused of low-level things to high-level things. I will say that 90% of my clients are facing some combination of mental health issues, substance abuse issues, poverty, housing insecurity, family trauma, or unemployment. And there are some programs in the courts to address some of those things. We have a mental health diversion part, we have a substance abuse diversion part. But the truth, the unfortunate truth is that the judicial system is not set up to address those issues systemically. The judicial system is a sort of place of last resort where we deal with people who have gotten to a place that I wish society hadn't let them get to. Society failed some of those people, some of my clients, and I do my best to help them once they get to court, charged with a crime, to identify those problems, but really the problems require community activism.
Thank you, thank you. What is an example of past legal work to mitigate the impact of criminalizing poverty?
I mean, I think there are, from the perspective of district attorneys, I think there are district attorneys in different ones in New York City who understand that certain arrests, certain crimes are crimes of poverty. New York City is a an interesting political animal. And over the last 10 years that I've been a public defender, we've seen waves of NYPD arrests for minor offenses and of district attorney prosecutions for minor offenses, and frankly, of judicial tolerance for those cases. There was an interesting study by John Jay that was released a few weeks ago that found that in the last 3 years in Brooklyn, the number of arrests for low-level offenses, such as taking up 2 seats on a subway, riding your bike on the sidewalk, jumping a turnstile, small petty larcenies, those arrests have skyrocketed and they're being prosecuted heavily by the district attorney's office. You know, my job as a public defender is to push back on that and to say these are crimes of poverty, these are crimes of unemployment, there's something else going on here, and that treating these issues with the criminal legal system is not a good use of resources when it comes to other criminal issues that are happening and should be addressed in other ways. But you know, I don't have a ton of control over that as a public defender. I think judges do. They don't get to make decisions, but they can ask prosecutors, why are you prosecuting this case? They can look critically at NYPD officers' conduct and say, why did you approach this person? Is it because you thought they were doing something criminal, or is it because you thought they looked poor? So judges have some role in that, but again, this is really a thing that requires, I think, a broader systemic coordinated systemic effort to address.
Thank you. What's your position on systemic racism in the criminal justice system, and how will you combat this as a judge?
I mean, it's endemic, and I see it all the time. I can count on 2 hands the number of clients I've had who are white. Most of my clients are Black men of color. I see how communities of color are policed differently, and how that data is then used to justify policing. Oh, there's more arrests in this, or there's more crime in this area, so we have to do more policing in that area. Well, there's more crime in that area because there's more policing in that area. I see endemic sexism, racism, homophobia, it's all there. And again, as a judge or as a public defender, I do everything I can in my power to make sure that I'm giving the best representation of my clients, no matter their race, no matter their ethnicity, no matter their background, no matter their socioeconomic background. I demand that judges do the same. For the most part, they do. Sometimes I have to remind them it's not always a pleasant thing to do as a litigant, because you're afraid that that judge might react harshly to your criticism. But it's important to remind judges of how certain communities are being policed, and that they need to look at it with a critical eye and understand that these things are coming because of systemic racism and other systemic poverty and other issues.
Thank you. We'll go on to your last question now. In the case of a young person who's arrested and has a case in family court, how will you use your power or discretion to assure the young person's safety instead of just jailing them?
Well, fortunately, and during my time at the Legal Aid Society in the last 5 years, New York has passed raise the age laws, which are intended, I should say, to ensure that young people under the age of 17 don't get treated. There isn't a default to treat them as adults and treat them and keep their cases in criminal court. There's a default assumption that those cases should go to family court. I will say, and I practice primarily in civil court, I don't practice in family court. I will say that anecdotally, I don't know if we have the numbers on this. Anecdotally, even though raise the age was passed, what we have seen is a different approach from the prosecutor's office, from the district attorney's office, to try to keep more cases in criminal court. And I used to have 1 colleague, now I have 3 colleagues whose primary job is to represent young people 17 and under in criminal court. That used to be a 1-person job, now it's a 3-person job. And I don't think that's just a result of a rise in crime. I think that's a result in backlash to the raise the age law. I think that science is sound, that young people, young men in particular, have brains that develop differently. Unfortunately, we live in a time and an era where that can mean really dangerous things, both for themselves and for the community. And so, working with them, whether it's in criminal court or family court, to match them with social workers, to make sure they're going to school, to make sure they're getting the resources they need in their home environment. Again, it's so much more about what's happening outside of court than what's happening in court, but it's really important to have a defense attorney, to have a prosecutor, and to have judges who understand the dynamics of what it's like when you're working with youth. Like I said, I'm primarily in criminal court. We have a fantastic judge in the youth part in Brooklyn Supreme Court who really understands that, and is sometimes, he sentences young men to prison sometimes, because that is the role of a judge. Sometimes if something goes wrong, if someone has taken a plea and they violate the terms of that plea, that is what happens. But I think he is an example of how all the different parts of a system doing their roles, working collaboratively in that space, can try to address the systemic issues for those youth in a way that appreciates their age.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, for answering the questions. Thank you for being present. We're going to move on to the next candidate, who is Stephen Berzio. But I just want to acknowledge District Leader Mark Hanna, who's in the audience as well.
But before I go, I would just say I do live in the 6th Municipal Court District. I haven't exactly decided where I'm running, so I may be running in one of the other districts, but I do live in the 6th.
Okay, thank you for that clarity.
Thank you.
Okay, and next we'll have Stephen Berzio. Okay, I do not see him coming up. So in the meantime, we will move on to the next candidate, who will be Michelle DeSouza. Welcome. And again, you have 2 minutes for an introduction, and then we'll go into your questions.
Sure. Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for having me this evening. I appreciate it. My name is Michelle DeSouza, and I am running also for the 6th Municipal District Judicial seat that is available. Currently, I serve as an Assistant Corporation Counsel for the City of New York, where I represent the city agencies. I am a trial attorney. Also, I argue motions in front of the court. I do settlement negotiations. I am also a mentor to the young attorneys that are here. I appear in a camp, which is an appeals court program for settlement negotiations. And I am currently also training some of the young attorneys here in the law department. Prior to being an assistant corporation counsel, I was an associate for a small all-women firm handling wills, trust, and estate, drafting wills, trust, and estate, appearing in probate court. Prior to that, I had my own practice for about 7 years, where I handled real estate matters, housing matters, immigration matters, practically anything that came in the door. I practiced in civil court, surrogates court, housing court. I've appeared in immigration. I've done DACA. And that's my legal experience. I actually went to law school after 10 years out of college while I was married and had my first child. And now my first child is 23 and he just took the LSAT. So I think I'm doing something really good, setting a good example to him, for him. And that is why I'm actually running to be a judge here, so I can be an example to others. And also for representation in my community. I am of Guyanese descent. I attended Erasmus Hall High School, and after college, Anthony, are you coming? I actually grew up also in the 43rd on Nostrand and Lenox Road, where I lived until I got married. I'm a Brooklynite for over 40 years.
Thank you, Michelle. Yes, I was there. That was my QTL. So we're just gonna jump right into your questions. Again, you have 2 minutes per question. The first question is, what is your definition of justice?
My definition of justice is being heard. Everyone who seeks justice feels that they've been wronged, and my definition of justice is that person here being heard and on the matter that they're felt wrong by. And I believe that everyone should be treated fairly, with dignity and respect. And that's executing justice. Even if you come out of leave court or leave thinking that you've not been heard or you haven't won, at least you feel that you have been heard. And I think that's my definition of justice.
Thank you. Now, next question is, what is an example of past legal work you mitigate to impact the criminalization of poverty?
I would say that mitigating, I would say that environment, community, background, ethnicity, those are things that factors that can mitigate being criminalized. Where you're from, whether you have an accent, whether you're appearing in court the way that you look. As a West Indian Guyanese, I've been treated that way. I felt criminalized being in court as an attorney. I was told appearing in court that not to sit in the front of the first row that's set out for attorneys, and I was told that don't sit there, you don't belong there. And I was shocked at first because I'm like, whoa, I'm an attorney, I should be treated fairly. Even if I'm not an attorney, I should be spoken to with respect and dignity in the courtroom. And I think that, and having an accent also, as you could probably hear, that I still have an accent, even though I've been here for over 40 years. That also is something that can be criminalized based on where you're from, where you're.
Thank you. Now, next question I'm going to ask is, please describe an area where judges need more training or where training should be mandatory for judges.
I am going to echo what Xavier said, that diversity is very important. Brooklyn is filled with people from all over the world. We are diversified, given Brooklyn. And I think that some judges do not understand that when someone comes into court from various backgrounds and they don't look like you, they're timid, they're afraid, they don't know what to expect. So I think that having real life situation, real life participation for judges to understand that, and in education, so that they can understand that when a litigant comes into court, they should be treated with dignity, respect, and they want to be heard.
Thank you. Now, your next question is, what's your position on systemic racism in the criminal justice system, and how will you combat this as a judge?
My position on systemic racism in the judicial system is, I believe that it shouldn't be. I think each one should be treated fairly and justly. not based on your race, your gender, or whatever religious belief you practice. In order to combat that, I think education is necessary for each judicial person and each judge. It should be mandatory that you should know how to treat people. You should know how to react when someone is in the courtroom that you wouldn't normally meet or would normally interact with. And I think that is important for judges to be able to handle those situations in a respectful and dignified manner and professional manner.
Thank you, Mr. Sousa. Thank you for taking the time to thank you for taking the time to answer the questions, to come before the panel, and also before the county community members and judicial delegates and the community in whole. We truly appreciate that. Real quick, before we get to the next candidate, I am going to dive into a question that was asked from the audience, which was, what is a municipal court district? So municipal court district is, you could call it a cutout section in every district, every assembly district that many assembly districts share. As you heard from some of the districts that I talked about so far in the 4th and the 7th, that how they share these districts, and each of those cutouts represent a certain area within that assembly district. For example, within the 43rd, we have the 2nd, we have the 4th, and we have the 6th, right? And these districts are, for civil court. So a lot of times, you'll see these candidates, on your ballot. Either it's going to be in the primary, or in cases like this, where there's been 3 vacancies provided by the governor, you'll see them in the general election, right? Now, in regards to the forums, same person, Alan Thought, thank you for asking these questions. Are forums like this held for judicial candidates in other districts? Yes, when it comes to the vacancies, yes, there are. The Kings County Democratic Party prides itself on providing forums to provide more information and transparency, to the Democrats, to the constituents, to voters, all throughout Brooklyn, to let them know who these candidates are, so you can present your questions as well too, but also for us to actually gain knowledge on the character, their beliefs, and also their history as whether they were judges before or the candidates looking to become judges. All right. So we'll be going into the 7th municipal. And the 7th municipal district covers the 53rd, 54th, 55th, and the 60th assembly districts. And we'll be hearing from Bridget Hamblin in regards to that municipal district there. And again, 2 minutes for an introduction, and then we'll continue with our questions.
Good evening, everyone. And thank you to the Kings County Democratic Party for hosting this forum, to giving myself and other candidates opportunity to be able to express to the community who we are and why we're seeking judicial election. My name is Bridget Hamblin, and I'm a proud native of Brooklyn, New York. I was born in East Flatbush and grew up in East New York, Brooklyn, where I've spent the majority of my life. I am the proud daughter of Caribbean parents. My mother hails from the island of St. Vincent and Grenadines, and my father from Guyana. Both have instilled hard work ethics in me. They both served in the healthcare profession, which guided my direction to be able to give back in various ways. For more than 20 years, I've had the privilege of serving the people of New York. I began my career as a prosecutor in Bronx County, where I was able to exercise sound judgment, evaluate evidence, listen carefully, and uphold justice for all that came before me. I transitioned later in my career to serving the people of New York City in various senior leadership roles in the New York City Fire Department and the New York City Department of Probation, where as a senior legal advisor, I was entrusted with the opportunity to make real life decisions that impacted the people of New York City. It also gave me an opportunity to realize that it's just not about knowing the law, but upholding integrity. I had opportunity to make very tough, difficult decisions that required integrity. Decisions where I knew it would not be what leadership wanted to hear, but still had to make them and make the appropriate recommendations because it's what was right under the law and what the people of New York City deserved. Outside of my legal career, I am a mother of two beautiful boys who are age 7, who every day remind me the importance of how important it is to remember that everyone is diverse and see life through different lenses. I'm also someone who's dedicated to community, giving back in various ways through various organizations that on issues that impact not only economic education, but social justice. I am seeking election to civil court judge because I believe I have the background and the experience that it takes to uphold the law and to apply it to all the facts given before me. But I'm also a person of professionalism, high character, moral integrity, and I treat everyone with dignity and respect. And those values that have been instilled within me from my parents and from my experiences, both personally and professionally, is what will continue to guide me as I move forward seeking this election. Thank you, and I'm open for all questions.
Thank you, Bridget, for your introduction. Now we're going to dive into these questions here. First question, should a judge consider the risks to mental and physical health presented by incarceration when determining whether there is an appropriate measure to impose either pretrial or as a punishment for conviction?
Thank you for that question. So I believe that judges should take into consideration all factors when determining sentencing. One factor should not outweigh the other. And so issues like mental health, issues like unemployment, those types of things, everything should be given equal weight when trying to hold someone not only accountable for their actions, but to rehabilitate and deter the behavior. And so, and something like mental health should be given weight and given factors when considering whether or not someone should be incarcerated.
All right, thank you. We had a question in the chat. Okay, do cases in our municipal courts and laws in New York City and New York State overlap, intersect, or conflict with federal laws at times? And Alan, thank you for the question.
So in New York courts, judges are applying New York state law. There are times that federal laws may conflict or trump New York state laws, but in New York courts, the law that is applied is just the law of the state. And so as a judge, our responsibility would be to apply New York state law to the facts that are presented before us.
Thank you. The next question is, what is your definition of justice?
Thank you for that question. So justice, in my definition of justice, means that every person who walks into the courtroom is treated with dignity and respect, irrespective of race, class, color, creed, nationality, sexual orientation, religious. Justice means that everyone gets an opportunity to be heard. Justice means that they have a judge who can carefully listen to everything they have to say, give them their fair opportunity to be heard, and then have a judge who's knowledgeable on the law who can then apply that to the facts without prejudice or any bias. My experience working as a public servant for the last 20 plus years here in New York City has equipped me with the ability to treat everyone with respect, to treat everyone with dignity, and to have the legal knowledge to be able to apply the law to the facts.
Thank you. And your next and last question is, please describe an area where judges need more training or where training should be mandatory for judges.
Thank you for that question. So in my most recent role, I serve as a principal law court attorney for the Deputy Chief Administrative Judge of New York, Justice Silvera. And so I know firsthand that judges receive training when they begin their career and ongoing training. And so judges do receive training. I think that one area that, if it's not already here, that we should seek to encompass is one that addresses any kind of unconscious biases. Brooklyn, being a Brooklyn native, our community and our borough is so diverse, it's so resilient, and it's so strong. And so everyone comes with their own personal biases and prejudices. And sometimes, even if you're trying to uphold the law and be fair, there are times that you may have an unconscious bias that you don't even know about. So having training that could actually bring that to light, I think is important, not only in the judicial system, but in any area of practice.
Thank you, Ms. Hamblin, for answering the questions. Thank you for introducing yourself and let folks understand where you stand as a candidate, your history, and also your passion. Truly appreciate that.
Thank you.
Now I'm going to answer a question in the chat in regards to the seats up for election or in criminal court. Well, the seats are up for civil court, but these judges can be placed in criminal court. They can be placed in family court, and they can also be again placed in criminal court as well too. So these are vacancies that we were able to gain from from the governor and so forth, and to fill these vacancies, the candidates have to basically go through what this forum, so that way you, the general public, can know who they are, can understand what their positions are as well too. Thank you. Now, sorry about that. Now I'd like to thank each and every one of the candidates, for participating. Again, thank you to Brian Chelcun, thank you to Michelle DeSouza, thank you to Xavier Carr, and also thank you to Bridget Hamblin. I also just received a correction that Stephen Bergio is not running at this time. But thank you for being present, though. I appreciate that. And thank you for y'all updating me with that information as well. Truly appreciate that. And again, thank you to the chair, Rodney Spashart Hermelin. Thank you to our district leaders, within these districts here who have worked tirelessly, to serve their districts, to serve their constituents, and also serve our democracy as well. I'd like to thank all the elected officials who have come in. And I see we were also joined by Judge Ellen Edwards. Thank you for attending as well. When it comes to democracy and justice, they go hand in hand. As we're experiencing, many injustices currently right now on the federal level, we must make sure that that we do correct that we do bring about accountability, but also remember that we have to pay attention to what's happening on a local level as well too. We have to make sure that we are flipping the ballot and looking for the judges, that we're doing our homework, that we're attending forums like this, but also that we're speaking to our neighbors, right? We have to make sure that we do not have low turnouts within, our communities, because your vote is your voice. Your vote is your power. Your vote is your representation at the end of the day. So it's very important to make sure that not only do you hear and attend, these forums, but you also spread the word to your neighbors who are not able to attend. Let them know about the candidates. Let them know about the forums. let them know about the meetings so that way they can be engaged as well too. Because our democracy doesn't have an exit strategy. It should be a continuation of what's needed, right? And what we should have. Now, just want to make sure I didn't miss anybody in my thanks for attending. But know what? Definitely, thank you everybody who did attend. You're the most important factor of this. So thank you to everybody who did attend. Remember that the general election is on November 3rd. And if you are not registered to vote or you know somebody who's not registered to vote, please make sure that you go to vote.nyc to register to vote. You can also register online. You could go to the your local board of elections and make sure you register to vote as well by paper, or you can just hand it in to them directly there, get it stamped, so that way that your voice will be heard. At the end of the day, I'd like to thank the chair, Judicial Chair Michael Boomer. I'd like to thank the staff and the volunteers who helped put this together. And again, I'd like to thank you, the voters, for actually, coming through to hear the candidates and to do your civic duty. Because at the end of the day, we must make sure that we hold our democracy to the highest standard and that we move forward together as Democrats. Thank you.